So this is the time that we set aside for any questions, anything that has been said so far that isn't clear, or any concerns about your own practice. This will be a good time to ask. Yes.
As in, we often mentally, if I'm not able to understand what does this anatta actually refer to. For example, when I say that mind should be brought from there back to meditation when it has gone astray. Now, who is doing that? It's me who is doing it. Now, if it's me doing it, then I'm fully involved in it at that particular moment. Is it me, or what is that?
Yes, this question always comes up in some form or other. If I'm none of these things, then what am I? And the answer I've heard given is simply awareness. One of the ways that you can experience this is like when you're fully present, not thinking, not planning, not worrying, not remembering. When you're just fully there, there's definitely something there. There's an awareness, but it's not. The concept of me is irrelevant at that point. You don't think, I am a man, I am from India, I am, and all of the things that you could use to describe yourself. There's just presence, there's awareness, a kind of silent, nameless awareness. So the Buddha's teachings, according to my understanding, the Buddha's teachings are all pointing us to that place of awareness. Which is why there's not very much said about it, actually. The teachings direct the awareness, but if you look into descriptions of, or the trying to decide, say, nibbana, trying to describe, say, nibbana or dhamma or something, that what's said about it is that you can experience it everywhere. It's all around us. It's everywhere. It's not fixed in any particular time. It's something that each one of us can taste. But there's no real concepts or words that can be used to describe it. So when you're aware that your mind has wandered, there's an awareness that the mind has wandered. There's the interest in bringing it back. And then there's the awareness that, yes, it's now I'm present. That would be my way of describing it. But I'm sure if you asked a fully enlightened human being, they would have a much better description. Yes?
Can I ask a question of my own?
You can ask a question of your own, yes.
So, because I've been running around the mic. So
yes.
When Ajahn Sumedho often refers pure awareness and interchangeably uses the word pure awareness and nibbana together. So, how do we see pure awareness as nibbana? Can you just elaborate on that?
Again, it's according to my understanding. Nibbana has been translated in different ways, has been described in different ways. And the sense is that it's something that actually, I don't even like to think of it as a thing. It's a state, it's an experience where the mind is completely at ease. There's no agitation, there's no wanting of any kind, no wanting to hold on, no wanting to get rid. Just a sense of ease and resting. And when we talk about pure awareness, it's similarly, it's a state of just perfect presence. You know, you're there, you're aware, you're awake, you're alert, but there's no grasping of any kind. No reaching out, no trying to get rid of. There's just a sense of the mind at ease. And this, again, according to my understanding, this comes about when we've fully understood, like, say, the teachings on the five khandhas. Like this morning, we went through form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. You know, they're all impermanent. There's no self in any of them. You know, when we really, really, really get that, when there's no trace of anything that's going to reach out of desire or try to push away out of aversion, then there is just that resting, that perfect presence. And it's not that you're dead, it's not that you're kind of lifeless. There's a sense of alertness, presence, responsiveness. So like the Buddha, after he was enlightened at the age of 35, quite a young man, and then he continued to live and teach and serve with great, very strong sense of compassion, wisdom, commitment to what he was doing, for 45 years. But he did what he did in response to the circumstances. It wasn't out of any personal desire. And when there was an occasion when he saw that actually his presence was not helpful, one time when the monks got into a quarrel at Kozambi, you may have heard of this, argument over a very, very trivial matter that somehow rather escalated. And neither side would give in. And in spite of the Buddha having been and tried to intervene and say, look, do this and let go of the difference, and they wouldn't. So he realized it was pointless, and so he left and went and lived in the forest for some time until eventually, just to finish the story, the village people got so fed up that the Buddha had gone away that they stopped offering food to the quarrelling monks, and they very quickly made up their quarrel at that point. So my sense is that the Buddha actually, it wasn't he stopped existing as a person, he still, even as a personality, there was certainly a very remarkable, unique human being there with very fine mind, very brilliant mind, even a sense of humor, and also tremendous sense of compassion and responsiveness. And these qualities come out, as you study the suttas. You get a sense of this mind and how he responded to each of the different kind of people who came. Sometimes people in very extreme circumstances, extreme states of grief, like the mothers who lost their babies. Sometimes these really clever debaters who kind of came just trying to pick a hole in his argument, trying to make him lose in a discussion, tried to humiliate him in some way, and each time he had his mind was sharp. He knew how to respond to them, and then they ended up having a lot of respect for him in the end. So my sense is that someone who is in this state, who's realized perfect liberation, they still continue to live in the world, but they're not thrown by any of the things that happen, so praise, blame, gain, loss, all of these things, there's a steadiness, there's a knowing, an understanding of things as they are. I often talk about, like the Buddha, one of the epithets of the Buddha is lokavitu, one who knows the worlds. And for me I find this very significant, because when we're sitting here, sometimes we feel wonderful, sometimes we feel horrible. Sometimes in our daily life we can go through states of great anguish or agitation or rage even, difficult states. And I sort of think, well, actually, it's like moving through many different worlds. And if the Buddha understands each of them, knows each of them as impermanent, unsatisfactory, having no need to identify with any of it, no need to struggle with any of it. So my sense is that the way that Ajahn Sumedho uses this is from the point of view of, when we are fully present, when there is a state of no struggle, that's like pure awareness or nibbana. Other scholars, other people might use a different way of categorizing it, but I think that's how my understanding of how he uses it. He also talks a lot about intuitive awareness, which is like the kind of knowing, the knowing of the response of how to respond in those kind of situations. Just a sense of attuning to Dhamma is the way I would describe it, rather than sort of thinking it out according to a whole lot of concepts. It's more like a sort of feeling it out. Intuition sort of is kind of like a feeling, sort of just discerning is another word I like to use, discerning the way. So I hope that's helpful.
Ajahn, my question is regarding the object of meditation. When you are saying...
Is this me or you? Somebody's doing something wrong.
Yes. When you are saying breathe in, focus on the breathe in and breathe out, then it is a one-pointed concentration, or we have to feel sensation also in the body, or it is throughout the body?
I actually gave you the choice. I didn't, when I was describing this practice, I didn't specify, and it was more an invitation. If you are particularly comfortable or used to doing it in one particular way, I was fine with you continuing in that practice. If you prefer to do another way, I was fine with you doing that. If you wanted to experiment a little bit, I was fine with you doing that. What I really wanted to encourage was to support a settling in the present. And however you experience the breath, however you're used to focusing on the breath, then that would be fine. For some people, they like to have a very refined focus at the nostril. Other people prefer to follow the air right in and right out. Other people like to kind of have a whole bodily awareness of the breathing process. And I wasn't being very specific. So there's no, according to your question, there's no right or wrong. The main thing is to use it to support awareness in the present moment. If you were undertaking a different kind of retreat with a different teacher, a different method, then they might be much more specific. But I tend to teach in a much more general way. Partly because I don't focus in that way myself. I tend to use a much more general focus. So sometimes even just being aware of the body rather than focusing on the breath itself. So that's the answer to the question.
I have a follow-on question. Mine is a follow-on question to his question. That if you are focusing on the breath and then there are body sensations and your attention goes there and you bring it back, could be one, or you could let the attention be with whatever body sensation is there. So there also you allow flexibility, or would you suggest getting back to...
I tend to do different things at different times. Like often in the beginning part of a retreat, I encourage people to stay with the breath, just to keep the instruction very, very simple. Later on, I would encourage a more experimental style of practice. So not that you absolutely have to stay with the breath. If you find the breath helpful as a focus, fine. If you prefer to investigate a bodily sensation or come to some part of the body, then I'd be fine with that. We call the breathing practice anapanasati, as I'm sure you're aware, which is like, and there is a very definite method that the Buddha describes, and equally other teachers have their methods that they describe. Is this, am I too close? Oh, it's maybe that one, yes. And then I would see awareness of, using other parts of the body. You can use them as a kind of way of focusing the mind, directing the mind, or you can use it as part of an investigation. So I think I might have spoken a little bit about samatha and vipassana, and how the samatha practice is, where the emphasis is on focusing the mind. Vipassana is emphasis on investigation. And so I would, and they're both actually very closely related to each other. But you could say that the bodily, a more general awareness of the body and examining bodily sensation would come more under the vipassana style, where you observe how sensations change. You observe the interrelation between the body and mind. And one of the things I always enjoy is, like, if I am trying to be present, trying to be focused with the breath or with some aspect of the body, one of the things I tend to notice is if I start thinking, my face tenses up. So I can feel my forehead tensing up. And so sometimes what I encourage people to do, if they are having difficulty to calm the mind, if they are having difficulty with a lot of thinking, I say, well, why don't you just try relaxing your forehead? And if you put attention into relaxing the forehead, you can't do that and hold on to a train of thought at the same time. So it's a kind of a little bit of a trick for getting out of a pattern of obsessive thinking, is to just really put attention into relaxing the forehead. And there was one retreat I taught at Amaravati, and at the end of the retreat, or in one of the interviews, somebody came to me and she said, very, very excited, she said, yes, and I'm doing the soft face practice. And I thought, oh, I've invented a new style of practice, the soft face practice. So the way that I do it, they do kind of blend. And whatever supports present moment awareness, whatever supports understanding, these are things that I'm interested in. And that we do it with the intention of learning as much as we can about this body and this mind. And if we want to learn, as I said last night, we need to be relaxed and happy. And so the breathing practice, I don't say it necessarily is, but can be a very good way of generating a sense of relaxation and ease and happiness.
That's actually true. I mean, my experience is that if I follow the
we need to hear this. Yes.
Yeah. So my experience is that if I follow what I shared, that
Yes.
if I get the attention back to the breath,
Yes.
and I don't really become too obsessed that, oh, why did the breath go away?
Yes.
If I can do that
Yes.
kind of gently,
Yes.
like you also explained.
Yes.
I mean, even in my own practice, I can see that there is a sense of weightlessness that comes, particularly in the arms, as if,
Yes.
earlier there's heaviness, and then suddenly you can see as if you can float your arm, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is that kind of guidance that it is more or less the right, or it's...
That sounds okay. That
Oh.
sounds fine. Yes. Yes. Don't float off altogether, though, please. Yeah. Very good.
It's
Yes.
all right.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's just a kind of bouncing off an idea too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ajahn, yesterday when you were speaking of having kindness and compassion for oneself, how do we have it for oneself?
For oneself.
Kindness and compassion for oneself. I mean, for myself or for oneself.
Yeah, I understand your question now, yes. So, how do we find compassion and kindness towards ourselves? I mean, there are different ways, and I mean, there's a very simple practice just using a mantra, actually. Just as you breathe, may this being be well. Just actually quite consciously, may this being be well, referring to yourself, of course. That in itself is like introducing a very skillful thought. You know, wishing, it's actually wishing well to yourself. It sounds a bit mechanical, it might sound a bit of a strange thing to do, and I resisted doing that for years. People, I heard about these metta bhavana and, may this being be well, may others be well, and I just couldn't be bothered with it. Very lazy meditator sometimes. But then one time I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And I was really quite surprised at how beneficial it was. So that's one thing you can try. Another thing that I found helpful, that I referred to, I think, a little bit yesterday perhaps, was actually really noticing how you respond to other people who are telling you their troubles. I'm sure you have people, friends, different people coming to you and telling you of things that they find difficult. And it can be interesting just to notice how you respond to them. And I don't think you'd probably say, oh, you stupid fool, or, I don't have time for you, or anything like that. I think you'd probably find a very nice way to respond to their difficulty. You'd give them space, you'd give them time, you'd listen carefully, and you'd find some way of offering some encouragement or support. So having recollected that, your response to others, then see if you can, the next time you're struggling with some difficult mind state or an impossible situation at work or with your family, just when you're sitting quietly, see if you can notice your habitual response to yourself, which may not be very kind, and then remember how you would have responded to somebody else, and see if you can just turn it around. And that can be quite an interesting little practice. And then and I think one of the things that's also useful, and obviously it's something that you've already done, is to realize how, if there is a lack of compassion and kindness towards oneself, often to start with, we don't realize how mean we are to ourselves. We don't have any idea. I remember one time I was at Chithurst, in quite early days, and it was a beautiful day, and I was kind of sitting at the back. There were sort of the nuns were there and the monks were there, and it was a very, very relaxed kind of time. And somebody said something about somebody hating somebody, and Ajahn Sumedho suddenly said, quite loudly, in front of everybody, he said, well, nobody hates anybody, except Chandasiri, who hates herself. I was a bit shocked and surprised. But it made me think, it made me contemplate and realize, the extent to which, I was very, very hard on myself. I always wanted to be a good nun, tried very hard to be a good nun, but of course never felt good enough, so I was always trying harder. Very critical, very judgmental. And strangely enough, that criticism and judgment actually carried over onto other people. You know, I could say all the right things, but inside I'd be thinking, you're just a wimp. If you were practicing properly, you'd be able to do it. And quite critical. So I had to do a lot of work to bring a more compassionate response to this being here. So, very important question, good question, and I hope the answer's helpful.
Ajahn, thank you for your time, firstly. Today morning, you made us chant the 5 subjects of frequent recollection. Towards the end, it says, I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide, supported by my karma, whatever karma I shall do for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir.
Yes.
So aren't we attached to the karma in every life? And I mean, you say everything is impermanent, but technically we and our karma are attached and we're related and we take it forward, good or bad. I mean, it's impermanent, it keeps changing, but it's still something that we are attached to.
You can be attached to it if you want to. And there is a possibility of liberation. So, obviously, it's better to do good karma than bad karma. So, to follow skillful thoughts, impulses, have skillful thoughts, use skillful speech, perform skillful actions with intention, intend to do things that are skillful, wholesome, helpful. This is good. This is better than performing unskillful thoughts, unskillful actions, unskillful speech. But we do have the possibility of acting or speaking without any attachment, without any involvement. So, talking a little bit earlier about the pure mind and about the Arahant, who continues to live in the world, continues to perform actions, but without any self-investment, without any sense of selfhood attached to those actions. So they respond in the right way without it kind of being added onto their CV, as it were. Without thinking, well, I've done this, I've done that. So what we do, what we think, how we are, does have an effect, definitely. And for most of us, most of the time, we still are acting with intention, and so there is a kind of karmic residue. And the encouragement is to keep recognizing this, noticing this, and little by little letting it go. But as I see it, it's the good things that we do, that like we talk about punya, making merits, doing good things. This can also be like a resource. It brings a sense of gladness into the heart, that something good has been done. And this can be an encouragement to us. So definitely to encourage doing good things, and to encourage us to keep investigating. Keep noticing if there's some kind of investment or attachment, some kind of hook. Sometimes, we can do a lot of very good things, not realizing that there's quite a lot of ego involvement. We're wanting praise. for having done something good. Sometimes we don't even realize it. And then you can have a situation where you've done something really, really good, and everyone said, oh, that's really good. And then a little while later, somebody else comes along and does something even better and gets even more praise. So that's a time that you can notice whether you actually did it with some kind of ego investment or not. If you were really doing it with a heart of letting go, then you'd probably be glad for the other person. If, on the other hand, you were hoping to be the best and somebody comes along and does something even better, and you feel a bit kind of resentful or upset, then that's an indication that actually maybe there's more work to be done. Not to put yourself down or feel bad about it, but just to be interested. Because we really want to learn about these things. We want to learn about the sense of self as it manifests, so that little by little, with the light of kindness, the light of awareness, we can wear it down. So it's like polishing something, polishing a mirror, and we might think it's nice, clean and polished, but then we suddenly realize there's a big splodge in the corner, and so this is a place we need to put a little bit more attention. So it's a very important passage, and one that we repeat very frequently, just as a reflection that it does matter what we do. It is significant, it does have an effect, and if we do something bad, if we hurt somebody, or even if we're unskillful in the way that if we hurt ourselves in some way, when we sit down to meditate, we notice it, we have to remember it. And the more we meditate, the more sensitive, the more attuned we become to these things. So there's a very strong incentive just to keep polishing and to keep letting go of that sense of selfhood. So although there's very clearly we very clearly have a relationship with our karma, our karmic baggage, it's quite a dynamic process. It's not as fixed and solid as it might seem. I mean, it might seem as though you've got this enormous karmic burden and you're never, ever, 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 ever going to be able to get rid of it. But, little by little. And there's some very nice verses in the Dhammapada about this, just little by little, the water jug is filled, just drop by drop. And, you don't have to worry about it, but more just keep doing good things and keep investigating and keep letting go. And learning from every moment of our lives, we can learn something. So it's an ongoing process. I was very interested quite a number of years ago when somebody was giving a teaching about karma and about thoughts, words, and deeds. And I always, you might have thought, well, actions are very significant, or what you say is very significant, but actually it's the thoughts that you need to notice. And over time, being on retreat like this, we have a chance to begin to learn how to recognize what kind of thoughts we're having. Rather than being totally identified with them, we begin to sort of recognize, and you begin to sense that you have a choice, which thoughts you feed, and which thoughts you say, actually, no, I'm not going to, I don't need to think that. Like if you feel angry and upset with somebody, you can spend weeks, months, years going over the thing over and over again, feeling angry and upset and wanting to hurt the person back. But that's not skillful. Whereas learning how to just say, okay, and to remember, the Buddha said, you'll never come to a sense of peace if you keep harboring resentment. So we need to learn how to keep putting down the less helpful thoughts and encouraging the more helpful thoughts, and just recognizing that we can do that. That was what I was saying about being a mind reader the other day. Learn how to read our own minds. And then learn how to direct our thoughts in a skillful way and away from unskillful ways of thinking. So, long answer to a short question. Is there anything else anybody wanted to ask about? Another question, okay.
To distinguish the khandas that you elaborated on this morning, what practice would help?
You mean to be able to tell one from the other?
Yeah.
I'll talk about them at some point. I think maybe not right now, because I think we've actually had quite a lot of talking. Or I'll just briefly mention each of them. So 5 khandhas, the 5 things, 5 ways that we think of ourselves. A body, that's fairly simple, material form. Feeling, in Buddhist terminology, feeling is not the same as emotion. Feeling is a kind of quality associated with every experience we have. It can be pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, or neutral, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. That's the simplest way of describing it. So very, very simple. Every experience we have, there is some kind of feeling associated with it. And if we don't notice it, it's probably because it's neutral. If we want more of it, it's because it's pleasant. If we want to get rid of it as quickly as possible or change it as quickly as possible, it's because it's unpleasant. So Vedana, feeling. Perception, the way that I understand it, is like recognition or naming of something. So that involves remembering and having had an experience of something before and then recognizing it. Yes, so that's perception. You might actually just recognize that you don't recognize it. so some things you say, and I sometimes use the example of with my alms bowl. Sometimes when I look at the food in my bowl, I see, well, that's an apple, that's a piece, that's rice, that's a chapati, that's nuts, that's, don't know what that is. And then you taste it, and then you know, okay, well, that's delicious. So next time, if you haven't had a chance to ask somebody what it was, what was that white thing in the bowl, then you just know, okay, well, that white thing is delicious. So that's how you recognize it. That's your perception of it. So that's perception. Mental formations is a vast category, and it covers like emotions, intentions, volition, wanting things, directing the mind in certain ways. It's like what we make of our experience, of what we perceive. So, you see somebody coming in the distance and you've maybe had an argument with them yesterday, so you perceive that that's the person you had an argument with, and then your mind goes into all the things that you're going to say to that person. That's when the sankharas start happening, the mental formations. So that's concepts, it covers a lot. So it's like mental activities of one kind or another. And then consciousness, we usually refer to sense consciousness, which relates to each of the senses. So eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, tongue, body consciousness, and mind. We can also, as I was saying just a few minutes ago, we can also recognize what's happening in the mind, which is when we bring awareness to our thinking. So consciousness moves very rapidly from one sense base to another. So I remember the first retreat I did, Ajahn Sumedho challenging us to see if we could see and hear at the same time. And I never quite mastered that, or I never quite understood what he was talking about. But now, if you're totally absorbed into looking at something, you can be so absorbed with the visual consciousness that you don't actually notice. You don't notice any sounds. You don't notice any thoughts. You're just totally with what you're seeing. Um, so consciousness is like something that is associated with each of the sense bases, the awareness. And so these four aspects of mind, they're usually all there together. But for this was just one way that they could be categorized, that the Buddha spoke of them. But normally, when we're not mindful, we just stick them all together and it's me. And so he encourages us to take it apart, to examine it in this way. So, good. So I think maybe we've had enough talking and enough thinking, and I'd like to suggest we take a 5-minute break, have a bit of fresh air if you feel like it, or stand up, and then I'd like to just offer a guided meditation on standing, because we haven't done that yet, and it's something that I would like to encourage, for when you are feeling a bit dull and sleepy, to just, stand up for a few minutes if you want to. So I'll give a short standing meditation guidance. Standing meditation can easily be overlooked because it seems so ordinary. But I really like to encourage it as a practice, partly because, already I've spoken about it being a good way to bring a sense of energy into the system if we're feeling very sleepy, very drowsy. Just to stand up for a few moments, that can be helpful. It's also helpful if you have a lot of bodily pain or restlessness. Sometimes just to stand up can be helpful if you're finding it really difficult to sit still. I like it also because it translates very well into daily life, because we quite often have to stand in daily life. Stand waiting for something, standing in a queue, waiting for the bus, waiting for the train, waiting for somebody who's supposed to come and meet you, waiting in the queue in the supermarket. All these kind of standings, they have the potential to be quite stressful, because the mind can go into all kinds of things. We can feel angry and frustrated at the person in front of us in the queue because they're being so slow. We can feel worried or concerned because that person hasn't turned up, hasn't arrived when they said they were going to. Or maybe we feel angry with them. Maybe they feel that they don't care. And we can make a whole story about that. We can worry that whether the bus is going to come. In England, quite often I have to catch a bus. At Hemel Hempstead, I catch a bus, and sometimes the buses are not, they don't always come exactly at the time that they're supposed to come. And so I can be standing there thinking, oh dear, has the bus already gone? And just sort of wondering what I would do if the bus had already gone. And my mind can go into a whole story about that. So I really like to encourage or to introduce and encourage the practice of standing meditation, because it's a practice that can help us just to stand and to be aware of the body standing and to be aware of what's happening in the mind. And if the mind is going into thoughts of worry or anger or irritation or concern, it can check those. Because with any of these kind of waiting times, somebody not showing up, not sure about whether the train has gone or not, these waiting times, the answer really usually is that we don't know. We don't know what's happened. And it can be very helpful just to stay with that don't know. Because then when it becomes clear what's happened, we're able to respond from a calm, present, kind place, rather than a feeling of frustration, irritation, worry, fury, whatever it might be, that we might have cooked up for ourselves with our less than completely skillful thinking. So what I like to suggest is that we'll stand up, and I'll just guide us a little bit, and then I'll ring the bell after 10 minutes or so standing, and those who would like to continue may do so, and if you prefer to sit down, that's completely fine. If while we're standing you at any stage feel a little bit dizzy or unwell, please sit down. If you know that you're not really able to stand, that's fine to stay sitting. But everyone who can stand, who would like to try, let's suggest that we get up and stand. Or is there a... That's right, I can use this one.
I think the clip-on will be better.
Okay. Whatever. As long as I don't make that horrible noise. I can hold it. Okay. Okay, so we stand with the feet a little bit apart, about a shoulder width apart. We stand on a nice firm surface, so better not standing on the cushion because they're a bit bouncy. So nice firm surface, feet a little bit apart, knees not pushed back, sort of slightly unlocked, so you could kind of bounce if you wanted to. I usually have the eyes closed, but if you want to have your eyes open, that's fine. And it can be helpful if you're feeling a bit dizzy to open the eyes. So to have your head in a position such that if you had your eyes open, you'd be looking straight ahead. You can have your hands hanging at the sides, just nice and loose. And take a little time just to feel into the posture. So we're aware of the contact of our feet on the ground, just the feeling of pressure on our feet. We try to stand so that the weight is evenly balanced, so not tipping forwards or backwards or to one side or the other, but rather just nicely evenly balanced. So aware of the feet and then the ankles, calves, knees. Coming up through the legs and the pelvis, into the trunk of the body. We're aware of the backbone particularly, aware of the neck and the head. See if you can keep your face nicely soft, a soft face practice. So if you're frowning, just see if you can just allow the muscles of the face to relax. And keep the shoulders loose as well. So having established our posture, nicely upright, head held up, shoulders relaxed, arms hanging loosely at the sides, we can bring awareness to the body breathing, just in the same way as we did with the sitting meditation. And if we notice thoughts arising in the mind, thoughts about the past, the future, we simply bring the awareness back to the breath, to the body as it stands here. And again, if you find it helpful to use a word or a phrase to further support your awareness, you can introduce that as well, linked with the breath, just from time to time as it's suitable, as it's helpful. If you find your face tensing up or your shoulders rising, then just let them drop. Keep your face soft, keep your shoulders soft. Just resting with the breath. Standing, standing, breathing, breathing. You may notice some kind of internal commentary or a kind of slight leaning into the future. How much longer have we got to stand? These kind of thoughts. And if you notice this, then just come back, enjoy the next breath. Giving it all the time in the world, just to be here, standing, breathing.